What did you do for Halloween? I personally spent my day watching documentaries about famous hauntings and not drawing. No wonder we are in November and I'm still doing Inktober. Whatever, I can't keep criticizing myself for every intro of every video. It's just that I'm kind of disappointed at my lack of speed, but if I focus on speed, then the artwork comes out horrible. It's like a two edged sword. Anyways, I know you are here for the ghost stories, so without further ado, let's start spreading fear. And if you like horror stories, then subscribe. Imagine one day you discover that you have these strange psychic powers. You are not aware that something like this could happen, where you are suddenly able not to only feel those, but also talk to those people who've crossed to the other side. That must freak the hell out of you. It would surely scare me. Well, it all began when Lily started to feel, see, and hear things that weren't necessarily there, at least not physically. But before we dive into the story proper, I should give you some background. Lily had always been a sensitive child. As she recounts her strange experiences, she says that she always had this extreme sensitivity towards everyone around her. She had grown up thinking that she was an empath. Since the age of 12, she was able not to only tell if someone was suffering from sadness or grief, but she could also feel it as if those feelings were her own. In time, with the help of her loving mother, she had come to terms with her nature and learned how to provide comfort and support to those around her. So, as she grew up, she also chose a profession which would complement her nature. She became a nurse. I should also mention that she was married and had two kids, so she was actually living a pretty nice and fulfilling life. One day, she was scheduled to make a visit to a patient's house. It was part of the community service program that the nurses who wanted to were free to volunteer. They would visit the elderly people of the local community to see if they needed care or treatment or anything to help them with. Lily would always make her visits on Thursday afternoons because that was the day her own schedule would be the lightest. She checked the list of people and found one Miss Agatha Martin, age 68, still remaining. The address was close by as well, in a relatively lonelier neighborhood Lily was familiar with. The general information mentioned that she was unmarried and was living alone. She had been admitted to their hospital twice in the past 8 months for respiratory issues, but released afterwards. But what really piqued Lily's interest was that under the occupation, Agatha had the most unusual of professions listed. It said clairvoyant and psychic medium. Personal practice, probably, because there was no organization's name mentioned. So Lily wasted no time and soon found herself greeted at the front door by an elderly lady. She had clear grey eyes and short curly silver hair. She was a bit hunched forward and appeared shorter than she was, definitely shorter than Lily. Her face, although wrinkled and tired, was still beautiful. She would have been a truly stunning lady in her youth. When Lily introduced herself, she smiled and let her in. However, strangely enough, before Lily could say anything, Miss Agatha said, "You have a gift, a marvelous gift." Lily just looked confused. "What?" Miss Agatha asked then, "Why don't you use your gift to help people as well?" Lily was pretty shocked and just said that she had no idea what Miss Agatha was talking about. Then, closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, Miss Agatha told her, "Child, you have the gift of seeing. Just like me, it is a rare gift. It would be a shame if you do not use it." Lily, despite herself, felt intrigued and proceeded to ask Miss Agatha about her occupation, about her powers of clairvoyance and psychic abilities. Miss Agatha smiled and told her that she had known that she was gifted since she was a child. Her grandmother was also one, and these abilities are often passed down in the family. Her grandmother helped her through her true awakening, performing the rituals to initiate her as a true seer. After that, she was able to communicate with the spirits more clearly. She often found that spirits of loved ones wanted to talk to their families or friends, but they could not. So she would help the spirits. In time, her reputation as a psychic medium grew, and she opened a private practice. She allowed grieving families and grieving spirits alike to talk to each other through her. It was her way of lifting the sorrows of the bereaved, and she treated her work as a noble one, saying that she had helped many spirits resolve their earthly bonds and pass on happily. This was all very exciting for Lily, and she listened to her experiences with rapt attention until she had to leave for the rest of her shift at the hospital. But she promised to visit her soon. This way, a friendship was formed between her and Miss Agatha. Lily would visit her often and listen to her accounts, becoming fascinated herself, especially one day when Miss Agatha encouraged her to use her gift and called upon a spirit. The experience was what words could not describe. Lily did not feel threatened or scared at all. In fact, talking to the spirit only made her feel warm and sympathetic towards it. So many spirits remain stuck, not knowing how to cross over and wander around aimlessly for eternity. This broke her heart. During the months to follow, Miss Agatha and Lily would frequently sit down and communicate with spirits in her former chamber. It was a modestly decorated room with a big round table in the center and chairs encircling it. Tapestries hung with various symbols and ancient runes. There was a huge grandfather clock in one corner. Miss Agatha insisted that spirits felt more comfortable in dim lights, so only a small lamp was at the center of the table. Lily started to feel comfortable with calling the spirits and talking to them, and the first time she helped a spirit cross over, she described it as the most exhilarating feeling she had ever experienced. She cried tears of joy and felt a burden lift off of her shoulders. So, Lily was way too excited when Miss Agatha suggested that she should formally go through the initiation ceremony. It was a family tradition, and since she saw Lily as one of her family now, she would be more than happy to perform it. She also mentioned that after initiation, Lily's abilities would increase, and it was just the right incentive to convince her that she wanted to do it as well. Miss Agatha was already waiting the night of the ceremony, and when Lily arrived at her place, she took her to the basement. She explained that they needed a good amount of space to draw the runes for the ritual, so the basement was the only option for now, and apologized for it not being as clean. But she was being too modest because Lily did not notice a single speck of dust where she had already set everything up. Candles were lit on each corner of a rectangle which was drawn on the floor. The rectangle was divided into more small rectangles, 8 in total, and on all 8 small squares there were different symbols drawn. She did not feel scared at all. In fact, she felt protected and happy. Miss Agatha told her to sit at the head of the symbol, and she sat opposite her. Then she asked her to close her eyes and began chanting. It sounded like a prayer at first, but she could not be sure because she could not recognize the language. She patiently waited in meditation when Miss Agatha finished her chanting and asked her to sacrifice something of hers. Miss Agatha said that it could be her blood, her nails, or her hair, whatever she wanted. So she pulled out her hair and placed a couple of strands on each of the 8 symbols. Then Miss Agatha began chanting again. At first, Lily thought that she could not feel anything too extraordinary apart from her own excitement. But towards the end of the ceremony, She suddenly felt a great warmth spread across her chest, felt reassuring hands on her back, and even heard faint giggling of happy children. And then the ceremony was over. Miss Agatha took her hair and put it inside a small rectangular silver casing with elegant engravings of flowers. Then she looped it inside a sparkling silver chain and put it on Lily. It was a beautiful piece of jewelry, and just looking at it proved that it must be a family heirloom. Lily went home that night with a smile on her face. However, that smile only lasted so long because just a week later, Miss Agatha passed away. The news shocked her. It broke her heart, and she felt like she had lost her own mother. The sadness only increased when she was notified that Miss Agatha had recently changed her will and left her house and all her savings to Lily. She could only go to the house after weeks of grieving, and the first thing she did was try to see if Miss Agatha's spirit still lingered on. But there was no one. It was natural for someone kind like her to find her way to the light. Lily was glad that she had not remained stuck in this world as a wandering spirit. Afterwards, she would make time to come to the house and to clean it up on the weekends, sometimes to meditate and talk to spirits alone. One late evening, when Lily had finished her meditation, she suddenly felt an unusual coldness on her back. Then came a heavy feeling over her chest, and she found it difficult to breathe. She had talked and seen a lot of spirits, but she'd never faced a malevolent one. She couldn't even see the spirit, but her physical discomfort grew all the more. Even her body was going numb. She was paralyzed for what seemed to be hours in her mind until the heavy feeling lifted. She immediately went to her own house, but nightmares of an old woman, not Miss Agatha, but of a wrinkled face with white eyes haunted her. It was frightening to see eyes devoid of pupils and still knowing that the white, ghostly eyes were staring right at her and telling her to come to her. During the week that followed, the nightmare followed her each night. The face of the woman, with its ashy pale skin, became more vivid, as if it was becoming more real each time. She would come to her, that cold, heavy feeling settling over her body, and tell her to come to her. She, however, never said yes to the offer, and it only seemed to anger the entity further. It was one thing to see her in her nightmares, but things quickly took a foul turn when the entity started to appear before her while she was wide awake. She would see it roaming around in her kitchen where her kids and husband ate, but no one could see her except Lily. Then, while making a trip from the children's ward towards the supply section, she saw the same entity standing at the door to the supply room. She held her hand up and motioned for Lily to come to her. Lily ran the other way and did not go in that direction for days. She also stopped going to Miss Agatha's house because being alone with that entity scared her so much more. The nights were more difficult now because she would wake up from her nightmare and see the entity with its white eyes aimed at her, standing at the foot of the bed on her side. Desperate to stop her hauntings, she decided that she would use her gifts and talk to the entity. This was a mistake which she realized later on. She gathered all her courage and went to Miss Agatha's house after a whole month. The place was stuffy and dusty, and she opened all the windows to let air in. Then went down to get the vacuum cleaner, but when she came up again, all the windows had been closed. The natural light obstructed now. The house again became dark and stuffy and cold. She was familiar with the sensation and knew that the entity had followed her here. She calmed herself and forced herself not to run out when the entity came and stood at the door of the private chamber and beckoned her to come in. Lily was already feeling numb with fear, but she went inside and sat at the table. She reached out and turned on the lamp. The light seemed too dim before reaching the figure of the entity. "Who are you? What do you want?" she asked. The entity whispered, a chilling voice that made her shiver. "Come to me." "Where?" she asked. The entity replied, "Sacrifice yourself." "Why would I sacrifice myself to you?" Lily gathered the courage to ask. The entity raised her hand and pointed around her neck where the silver necklace hung. Then, all of a sudden, she seemed to bolt at her as if trying to tackle her down. Lily was so frightened that she jumped away and ran out of the house. She had no idea what would have happened to her if she had stayed frozen on the spot. The entity wanted her dead. She was sure of that. The hauntings became more prominent afterwards, where the entity would physically torment her. She would have bruises and scratches on her arms and feet when the entity tried to physically drag her out of the bed multiple times. Lily confessed everything to her husband and showed him her injuries, and her husband was as frightened as her. But the entity never aimed at her husband or children, which was somewhat a relief for her. Unable to endure these tortures anymore, she sought out another psychic. She had to drive over to the next town. She took her husband with her, but throughout the journey their car kept stopping. Apparently nothing was wrong, but the engine would not start. They called a cab, and even the cab's tires got punctured halfway. A journey that would have taken 1 hour took them 4 hours in total. When they reached the psychic, named Rosa, it was already past 5 p.m. She took one look at her and gasped. She told her that she had been probably part of a ritual where she had not only summoned the dark entity but also promised her soul to her. Lily denied ever having participated in any ritual of that sort until she revealed the process of her initiation ceremony and revealed the silver necklace she wore as well. Rose's face darkened at once, and she confirmed that what she had thought of as an initiation ceremony was actually a dark summoning ritual. And the silver necklace with her hair inside was the beacon that was keeping the entity reminded of her promise to sacrifice herself. Lily was in denial and she explained how Miss Agatha would never do something like that to her. However, they had no way of asking her now why she did it, or even if she did it intentionally. But Rosa offered her own hypothesis, saying that often mediums and psychics are lashed onto by demons and dark entities. Such things prevent them from crossing over, and the soul is also greatly damaged. Performing a ritual and offering a sacrifice in her stead, someone with the same abilities as her had probably helped Miss Agatha to die peacefully and cross over. Dismayed at such a revelation, Lily was desperate to get rid of it, but only taking off the necklace was useless. Rosa set a date to perform a cleansing ritual to drive away the entity and break the contract of sacrifice. On the day of the ritual, when Rosa, Lily, and her husband sat down, the first thing she noticed was how angry the entity was. When the ritual began, furniture began to shake around them. Breakable pieces of decorations shattered everywhere. Rosa continued, however, with a brave face. At one time, Lily even felt that she was being slapped continuously by someone. Her cheeks burned and swelled. When she put the necklace inside a goblet and Rosa set it on fire, she heard angry screams so loud that her ears started to ring. During the end of the ceremony, Lily even felt like she was being choked. Yet, through all that, the ritual was completed and they were able to go back home. reassured by Rosa that the contract had been severed successfully. The entity stopped appearing after that, but she, till this day, could not understand why someone as sweet as Miss Agatha would trick her like that. Was leaving her everything she had in her death a way to compensate for what she had done to Lily?